at 6:30, so we'll begin. We're still waiting for a couple of people, but maybe they'll turn up in a minute. Maybe not. Right, so let's begin with the fire evacuation procedures. Where are they? Right. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening, therefore if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Thank you. Next, to note that the open proceedings of the meeting are webcast. Can you please switch off your mobiles or put them to silent? Probably already done that. Thank you. Next, to receive apologies for absence. I've received an apology from Councillor Raffel. I haven't received any others, so I'm hoping that we might have one or two more in a minute. So no resignations and replacements, no conflicts of interest, I'm assuming. No? No urgent items. So the first main item is to appoint a vice chair for this committee. Do we have a proposal, Councillor Goodson?
I'd like to propose Councillor Burgess. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. Is that agreed by the committee? Agreed? Thank you very much. Can you come and join me, Rita? Thanks. Right, while Councillor Mrs Burgess makes her way forward, can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of March, found at paper A on the order paper? Are we agreed on that? Agreed? Thank you very much. Right, we've got no member or public participation, so it should be a fairly straightforward meeting. We've got two policies to consider this evening, and the first one is the new policy on licences for tables and chairs on the highway, and that can be found at paper B. And Linda, would you introduce it, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. We're currently looking at all our policies, partly due to the shared service arrangements that we're in, to see what we can sort of streamline with heart, but also just to make sure that ours are still up to date and reflect current situations. Members will be aware there's a lot of work going on at the top of town to regenerate that area, and the top of town does sit within a conservation area. So we decided to look at the current policy for the licences that sit outside the premises at the top of town, sort of pavement cafes, whatever you'd like to call them, and have a look at whether the policy was still fit for purpose, and to also to look at the guidance notes that we'd issued. Having reviewed that, we felt that the guidance notes in themselves were pretty good in terms of looking like a policy. So after meeting with the town centre manager, project officer Chaz Bradfield, and with the conservation officer, we felt that we could probably just change the guidance notes into a policy document, because they clearly set out the expectations of the authority and how we want the top of town to look, how we don't want it to conflict with conservation and that sort of thing. So we've tweaked the guidance notes to make them read more like a policy, make it clearer for us, clearer for the public and for the potential licence holders, and put this in on the committee report tonight for you to adopt as a new policy. I don't propose to go through all of the detail, but we have included a little bit more discretion about where the applications can be varied. You can't predict what every application is going to be like. Yeah, they're all for tables and chairs outside premises, but some are outside licensed premises, some are outside just cafes. We've just had one for outside of the museum at the top of town. So they're to cover all eventualities. And we felt that this does give good, clear guidance to the potential applicants and helps officers make decisions more clearly, and also fits in nicely with the top of town regeneration and the conservation area restrictions. I'm very happy to take any questions if you'd like to ask any.
Councillor Frankham.
Linda. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Under 2.2, it says at least a width of 0.9 of a metre, so there's wheelchair access. I thought it had to be slightly larger than that for wheelchair access. And when I did health and safety training years ago with a company, we were told we had to have a 1.2 gangway for health and safety reasons. So I was just wondering if that's the correct width. That's the first question.
Remind me which paragraph again, sorry.
Can I just point out that we're looking at the new policy, which is the one that's got a picture of the T-bar on the front. Obviously, the old ones are before that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I did consult with planning on that, and they assured me that that was okay, but I'm happy to go back and double check that if members are happy for me to change that figure if it does need to be bigger at a later date. I'm happy to double check that, but I did check with planning.
As I say, when I did health and safety training, I got told off because my desk didn't have the 1.2 metre gap to get to it. So that's why I remember the distance. So yeah, I'd like that confirmed. If it's fine, then great. And I'm not sure if it's particularly relevant for this, but one thing that I've noticed when you have outside chairs and tables, all the people down the centre alleyway to get in are smoking. And I really hate walking through the smoke. But I don't know if there's anything you can do on that. And I don't recall anything around. There's about clean air, but nothing about smoking. I get quite frustrated as well that when I'm in Festival Place, the number of people walking through there smoking, when it's a no smoking zone, which is not this policy. I just thought I'd take the opportunity to mention that. I tend to stay inside the premises in there because I get really frustrated sat outside watching everyone just casually walking through smoking.
I have put a point in at paragraph 2.6.2 about where the area is to be used for eating. Smoking must not be allowed in the area, and separate area must be allocated for smokers away from the tables and chairs. We felt that was quite important because these areas are commonly used for smokers, and if you all happen to be eating or drinking outside, it's not very pleasant. So we felt it was quite important to make that a bit more robust.
Just the entrance part as well, so I don't think you can have that. As an asthmatic, I love going through smoke.
I can make a change to that, but I think that probably covers it. But if you want me to be more specific,
I think the officer's judgment's good enough.
okay, thank you.
I mean, I do think we have to be a little bit reasonable. If it's the only place where people can smoke, so we just have to walk around them sometimes. Okay, thanks. I mean, rather than ask questions now, shall we just go through it bit by bit, and then if you've got a comment or a question at any stage, we'll just ask it. So if we just go to the beginning, introduction, which is on page 19 of 68. Any comments? Presumably you're happy with the introduction. And assessing the proposed location. Space, you've already asked that one. I think I mentioned that one as well, because wheelchairs have actually got very, very big nowadays. Some of them are massive. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know that some severely disabled people with motor neuron disease or something do need these very big ones. Councillor Godison.
Thank you, Chair. No, I was just curious, assessing the proposed location, where it says will the proposed use impact on neighbouring business trade? Does this mean in the event of an adjacent business objecting, is it Linda who's going to make the decision about whether that objection is reasonable or not? Because I mean, I presume lots of people might object to the fact there are people sitting outside. Oh, sorry.
We do consult with the neighbouring businesses for that very reason, because sometimes if you've got customers sitting right in the window, they may not feel comfortable having people sitting outside right beside them if it's on the boundary. So we do consult with the neighbouring businesses, and we do consider their comments. And if we felt that there was going to be an impact on their business or detrimental impact, then we could suggest perhaps changes to the layout or reduction in the size. So we can be quite sort of pragmatic about the impact on the business and make suitable changes if needed.
Would there ever be a scenario when we'd actually have to have a subcommittee hearing in order to decide something like this?
There is no scope for that in the Highways Act, but I think that the direction of this council is that we like to give people that opportunity. So potentially there could be. It would really depend on the issue at the time, but there's potential for that because we like to give our customers a fair hearing.
Well, if I could just follow that up rather on the lines of the chairman's comments. I mean, if a neighbouring business were to complain, and you felt that perhaps his complaint wasn't reasonable, if he still wished to go on complaining, has he then got to shut up, or can he appeal to somebody to decide whether his complaint's reasonable or not?
I think it's like anything. If we didn't feel that the complaint was justified, we could potentially grant with conditions to mitigate the complainant's concerns, or grant and monitor, because sometimes people anticipate problems, and then when you grant the licence, actually there are no problems at all. So we would consider it from both sides and potentially grant and see how it goes, or grant with conditions, because these are renewable every year. It's not an ongoing licence like a premises licence, so we would monitor and review, obviously for the benefit of the neighbouring business as well.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we've looked at the space enclosures. Anybody have any comment or question about the enclosure? The sockets, yes. Yes. But sensible because it defines the area straight off. Now, the conservation section, 2.4. Any questions? I've just got one, 2.4.3, where it deals with advertising. Is that only for conservation areas, or does that apply to all areas?
It applies to all areas, but there are more restrictions within the conservation area.
Does it appear anywhere else, or should we say advertising within any outdoor seating area, whether in a conservation area? Or does it say it elsewhere? I can't quite. Okay. Shall we just say that we'll amend that to make it clear that they're more stringent for conservation, but it does apply to all? Okay. Okay, we're happy just to add that in and just let Linda get on with that. Okay, thank you. Moving on, furniture. Yes, Councillor Godison.
Thank you, Chair. Now, it's 254 with the outdoor heaters. These outdoor heaters are very bad for the environment and the ozone layer. Is it really necessary for people to be allowed to have outdoor heaters?
We've never had any complaints or observations about outdoor heaters, and the public welcome them in terms of being able to sit out in the cooler evenings. We'd probably have to do some research to establish the impact on the environment, but they are very popular and it's never come up as an issue before. Would you like me to do some more work on that at all?
I only mention it because I seem to remember about 25 years ago when I was running Barton's Mill that we were told at that stage that we couldn't have outdoor heaters because the government was against them because they're very bad for the ozone layer. But I don't know whether I can't remember whether that was true or whether it's been changed since. But the fact of the matter is they are very bad for the ozone layer.
I mean, it could be that in 25 years they've improved in terms of environmental friendliness. I think I probably have to say that isn't really an issue for licensing, is it? But it's a good point, fair point. Right, well, on to what you were just talking about, the environment section. Any comments? Yes, Councillor Godison.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious about 262 because quite recently, in fact very recently, I rang up on the legal on behalf of the parish council to ask whether we would be allowed on, whether it was permissible on our recreation ground where the children in the children's play areas, where we could whether we could put up a notice saying that people shouldn't smoke near the children's play areas. And the response we got, I'm not sure who it was who gave the response, but the response we got was that we could put up a notice requesting people not to smoke, but as smoking is permissible in open areas, we could not put up a notice saying you may not smoke in these areas. So I'm just curious, as it's an outside area and people are allowed to smoke in outside areas, whether it's actually legal for us to tell them they can't smoke there. I mean, I agree they shouldn't smoke. I'm just interested in whether...
Okay, so thank you. The answer is that CEP are looking at this whole issue of whether or not we can put up signs regarding smoking. But at least for you then, Councillor Frankham, if they're eating, you'll be okay. It's only if they're just drinking that you have to walk through it. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Jones.
26.4 litter. How do we monitor that? It says, you know, any stray litter they should pick up, you know, that's the outline of the thing, which is fine. But does it ever get monitored? If you see what I mean, or enforced even?
I guarantee you the neighbouring premises will soon tell us. Yeah. So yes, we do enforce it, and we put it specifically on as a licence condition that all litter must be cleared up within the boundary of the, you know, I forget what the wording of the condition is, within 2 metres of the boundary or something that's their litter. But the neighbouring premises will tell us without a doubt.
Can I ask, isn't not really neighbouring premises in as much as you see litter now that spreads from McDonald's is one, and there's others, to be fair, but that's the common one. You find boxes everywhere where, i.e., customers decide to throw them. Does that include, you know, because you could have a cafe with takeaways and things like that, does that include that or something?
Yeah, we put the condition on there that because obviously people might go for lunch and open their sandwich there, because some of them will buy from a takeaway and eat outside and leave the stuff on the table, even serviettes, that sort of thing. So we make it as a condition of the licence that the premises licensee or the licence person in charge has to go out and clear the area regularly, and this immediate area surrounding their tables and chairs of the litter that's come from their business. Yeah.
I think it's a good.
Thank you. Yeah, they're onto it. Okay. 2.7 other. Oh, is that everything to do with environment? Any more questions on that section? No. Okay. Other needs. Stroke neighbours. Any questions or comments? I've just got one. 273 reads a little bit strange. It says manhole covers and other access points for water and drains must be left uncovered. It just doesn't quite sound right. I think unimpeded would probably be a better word. It's manhole covers must be left uncovered. Doesn't sound like a good policy, does it? Any other comments on that section? No? Consents required in consultation. Any comments there? Nope. Okay. And just going through then, planning consent, shout if you've got anything. Premises licence, it's just one paragraph. Then let's just take the whole application process, supporting documents, and then on to the last section of 5, if permission is granted. Any comments there? Yes, Councillor Godison.
Just a quick one. I mean, I'm sure hopefully I just want to make sure I've read it correctly. I mean, 5.5, where it says that the police may stipulate that toughened stroke non-glass drinking devices will be used. I presume the bottles will not be permitted means at all time in any outside, not just if the police happen to mention it. I mean, not just if the police wish to put that as in a condition, but bottles should not be on tables outside at any times. Is that what that means, or does it mean that only if the police request that that's a condition? Sorry.
Oh, well, at this stage it means if the police stipulate as a condition, because often you'll get a couple go to a premises over lunch and have a bottle of wine between them, and they want to have the bottle of wine on the table. During the day it's less of an issue, but generally where there's an application for the evening, the police will almost certainly put that condition on because they don't want glass bottles outside at night. But again, it's a case-by-case consideration. Different premises do different things, but generally during the day there is no issue with wine bottles, a couple having a bottle of wine over a lunch break. So we didn't want to say you can't have them at all, because there isn't a problem during the day. But clearly during the nighttime economy periods, you don't want any risk of any bottles being used as weapons when things liven up. So that would be likely the police would object.
Thank you. I don't think that's terribly clear here. I mean, would it not be better to say something like, you know, bottles will never be permitted during the evening, will be permitted during lunchtimes unless the police raise an objection? Because the way I read this is that no bottles will not be permitted at any time. It doesn't. It says the police may stipulate that toughened stroke non-glass drinking devices to be used within the enclosed area of the highway. Full stop, as it were. Bottles will not be permitted within the enclosed area. To me, that reads bottles will never be allowed in the enclosed area.
The way it was written was that the police, as part of the coordinated consultation process, may stipulate that toughened non-glass drinking devices be used within the enclosed area of the highway, comma, or semicolon, bottles will not be permitted in the enclosed area, and or supervisors patrol. So that's three options there that we're saying the police could have. So they could stipulate none, one, two or three of those. So I think it's probably the way the sentence is written, because some premises may be out on their own, not in a nighttime economy area or perhaps a bar on its own, that it may be appropriate for them to be allowed bottle. We wanted to give that option to say this could be allowed or it couldn't, depending on each case on its merits, and it gives the police, this is really saying to applicants that the police might consider that your premises isn't suitable to have glass bottles either at the day or in the night. So it's keeping it open in its broadest sense to allow the police to make that determination, because sometimes it is okay.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I understand entirely the logic of what you're saying. I'm just saying that as an ex-lawyer, I don't think that's been terribly well phrased.
I think that's a good point. I wonder if we should even just put "and or bottles will not be permitted within the enclosed area," so that doesn't make a bald statement that bottles won't. It does read a little bit like it's never going to be permitted.
Or may not be permitted.
Oh, yeah, and or bottles may not be permitted. Yeah, I think something a little softer, yes. And or bottles may not be. I think so, that's, yeah, I think so. Councillor Frankham.
I've been talking, I just noticed on 5.9, it says paragraph 2.8.2 and not 2. I couldn't find 2.2. I think it should be 2.6, and that bracket bit should be...
Yeah, it should be 2.6.2, yes. Let's just cross out that. Yeah. Thank you, well done. Could I just also raise the question of 5.7? You say the council expects that the activities of the licensee and customers are contained within the licence area. That's quite a soft thing. Do you mean expects, in other words, or do you want will require that? Do you prefer would you prefer it to be a little bit harder?
In the policies, we've generally set out the council's expectations, which is why I've used the word expect. In our Licensing Act policy, it's expected that, and the council expects this. So I use the same wording just for sort of keeping it the same, because we would expect them to retain those licensable activities within that area. If they start spilling out onto the street, then they're in breach of it. Okay. So it's just that word that we've used in other policies, so for consistency, really.
Godison.
Sorry to be boring, but yet again, I think that's a bad word, because somebody can say it could be interpreted as means that the council would like that to be, expects it, but doesn't demand it or insist on it. So it's not really strong enough. I mean, I know that, I realise that it then goes on to talk about agree not to provide refreshments or consumption elsewhere on the highway, but it is possible to imagine that people using that area might get involved in some activities outside the area which are necessarily part of what's going on in the area, but there's nothing to suggest that the council demands that they don't do that. But anyway, that's all. But
The only point I'd make on that is that this is the policy, this isn't the licence conditions, this isn't the enforceable bit, this is the council setting out its stall about how we would regulate tables and chairs on the highway. So it's a bit difficult to use such words as require and must in a policy, because we're just setting out our stall, we're saying this is how we want it to look within the boundaries that we've set. Whereas if there was an issue that needed a condition, we could say that the licence condition says that activities will only take place within the licence area, but that goes on to the licence, which is the enforceable bit. I know I'm a bit worried here speaking to an ex-lawyer.
no, I understand.
Just so I'm getting, because it's just setting out the stalls really.
Could you switch your, thank you.
If there was a disagreement and the person who was disagreeing had a good lawyer, he would make mincemeat of the word council expects.
I think Linda's point, though, is that on the actual licence conditions itself, if necessary, it could be stronger. But, I mean, I agree with you. Some of these are stronger than others, aren't they? I mean, some say you shall and some say you're expected to. But how do we want to? I mean, let's ask the committee. Would you rather it said at 5.7 the council would require that activities? You're happy as it is? Okay.
I think it should be a bit stronger in as much as, yeah, it is the policy, but it's not, how can you put it, it's not we'll have this bit and not that bit. So if it's strong enough and it's outlined, we're outlining a policy, so therefore it should say it should be within those boundaries, not what we expect. It will be. When you think about it, you're saying it will be, but that's part of our policy. It's not saying, it's like saying, well, we expect to have a committee meeting here, but you may have one outside for a different reason, if you see what I mean.
Councillor Goderson.
Yeah, if I could just add that, of course, in planning terms, any activity which the licensee is getting involved in have to be within the confines of that area which has been given planning permission for that activity to take place. So in this case that would be within the premises or within the outside area which has been allocated for outside eating or drinking. I mean, I think it should be a bit stronger than expects.
Yes, Linda suggested that we say the activities of the licensee and the customers must be contained within the licensed area. Okay, that's fine. It's a moot point. I mean, it just makes it sound a bit more strong. Okay, thank you. And just any other comments on the whole thing? Yes, Councillor Dunlop.
Thank you. Looking at the leading photograph on page 1, drew me back to paragraph 266, where we are talking about defined pavement areas. Now, would the defined pavement area be the boundary of the fence on the photograph? Because if the answer is yes, it could lead to a bit of confusion because the menu board is outside of that area. Oh, I'm sorry.
And you have passed tonight's test. Yeah, I just put the picture in to give it a bit of colour for the document. You're absolutely right, the A board should be contained within the licensed area. So he's not meeting the requirements of that particular paragraph. So we will double check that. But yes, the boundary is the boundary.
So we will adjust the photograph on the front of our policy, definitely. Okay.
Am I going to have a word in his ear?
Yes, definitely. Okay, we've been through it. Are there any other points anybody wants to make? Now, we've just suggested 1 or 2 amendments. I'm assuming that you've got those down, have you? Okay, including checking the width of the wheelchair access and 1 or 2 minor amendments. Are we happy, therefore? Do we need to list what they are? Can you just tell us what they are?
Thank you. Okay, so I've got that we're checking the widths of the wheelchairs and other specific measurements within the report. We are amending 2.7.3 on page 24. Amending 5.5 to say and or bottles may not be. 5.9 changing the reference in there just to remove 2.8.2 and changing the wording at 5.7 that must be contained within the licensed area. That's what I've got. If there's anything else.
We were also going to amend 2.4.3 to make it clear about advertising applies both to conservation areas and non-conservation areas.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Frankham.
Just wondering if it's worth checking with the Disability Access Group about the width as well, because planning's one thing. They did a disabled door in the orchard, and these wheelchairs can't get through because although it meets the criteria, it's not quite wide enough. So it might be actually just going that one step further just to confirm.
I imagine building regs probably would have the definitive answer, wouldn't they? But I can certainly check with both.
Yeah,
Okay, so we'll leave it to Linda to double treble check that the width is correct. Subject to those amendments, are we all agreed that we will adopt this policy? Agreed? Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the next policy, which is review of our charity street collection policy, which is found at paper C. Linda.
Thank you. Charity collections, we generally think of people in the street with their tins, shaking their tins to collect money. These were first regulated under the 1916 Police Factories Miscellaneous Provisions Act. So it's quite old legislation and does refer specifically to collecting tins. Charity collections have moved on, and I think you all have heard of the expression chuggers, whereby more and more charity collections are being done by direct debit and other means or signing up to things. So we've decided to take a review of this particular process because the functions moved around the council, but it's been sat in licensing since 2007 and we haven't actually done a lot with it, but it's creating quite a bit of work. At the moment we have to issue permits for cash collections, and for some years now this council's had a voluntary code of conduct for direct debit collections where we ask people to sign up if they want to collect in the borough, particularly in the top of town. We don't issue them for the rest of the borough, and generally the charities do like to sign up for that, so we're quite lucky in that respect. But effectively, if a charity turns up collecting by direct debit, we can't actually do anything about it other than advise them that we have the voluntary code of conduct. We're very lucky here we don't have charities generally turning up or promoters turning up to do that. We also looked at where we were issuing permits for, and you'll see from the figures in the report that we issue a lot of permits for shop doorways and for the festival place and the malls, which effectively is private land, although the public have access to it. It is capable of being locked or closed off or whatever. But historically, this council has issued permits for those areas because of the fact the public can access them. So I did a straw poll across other local authorities to say, do you licence them in these areas? If so, why? And if not, why not? And we had a resounding response of, no, we don't do it because they're not technically a street. So we felt that, and also the other thing is we require the applicants to provide evidence that the landowner has given them permission to collect there, so they get permission from Festival Place, which they bring to us. So effectively the charities are having to do it twice. And we felt this was quite a burden on charities, which basically they're trying to raise money, and we don't want to be wasting their time and resources. So having regard to the outcome of the sort of survey that I did, we felt that it was an opportunity for us to review how we issue permits, reduce the impact on officer time, because we are having to use overtime to try and report on the or log all the financial returns. And we just felt that it was a burden on both sides. And of course there's a cost to this council because we don't get any money in for these, and they are quite time consuming. So we looked at the figures for last year, and I think I said in the report we did 189 last year, of which 121 were on those areas that we're trying to avoid having to do for the sake of the charities. So what we've done is we've just redrafted a policy to reduce the need for people to get permits from us to collect in those areas, and also to restrict the numbers slightly, simply because the charities tend to bulk book, and it does reduce the access to lots of charities. We wanted to broaden the opportunity for more charities to collect by reducing the bulk booking as well. And also going back to the previous report where we talked about the regeneration of the top of town, there's lots more markets happening now. There's other things going on, and sometimes the charity collections can add to that, and which creates angst for the local businesses and the public. Sometimes the public just want to be able to come into the top of the town and do a bit of shopping. They don't want to be hounded on every street corner. Most of the charity collectors are very good. Those that do the voluntary stuff, they do comply with the code of conduct, and we've got the regulations for those that we do have to issue permits for. So really we've set out a new policy to reduce the number of collections and just allow a bit more opportunity for other charities to be able to collect without being beaten to it by the charities that block book. And then again to reduce the impact on the council budgets by reducing the numbers that we have to deal with. I think that probably summarises it, unless there's any questions.
Probably easiest to just go through it like we did before and just take it section by section. So we're looking at page 40 of 68, which is the proposed new policy, and that incorporates the regulations and the direct debit collection code of conduct. Introduction on page 42. I'll just go through it and just shout, put your hand up. Policy objectives. Page 43, the definitions obviously are fairly standard. The next page, this is the street collection regulations. I gather that these are fairly standard. They can't really be changed because they're part of the law. So in that case, we're now moving on to page 48. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, which is the administration of applications for charity street collection permits. Councillor Frankham.
Just wanted to go back actually to number 8 on 45. Inconvenience or annoyance to any person. Is that defined anywhere else? Because I find some people find the people collecting money, all of them annoyance, so we could end up and never having any. Is that... It's page 45, point 8. It says inconvenience or annoyance to any person. Well, some people think they're all annoying, so we'll never have any.
I'll just comment that that's the regulations are under how they must operate. So it's saying that while they're doing it, they mustn't behave in that way. So yeah,
They don't shake their tin in your face anymore like they used to. Okay, so page 48, administration. Could I just point out that 5.3, I think actually the regulations are at section 4, not section 3. Okay, section 4. Okay, moving down, there's a specific section that deals with the top of town area. And now we're moving on to page 49. And just like to point out that I have spoken to Linda, because the way I look at it, it's a little bit confusing to have suddenly a bit about direct debit in the middle of what is essentially a cash collection section. And so it's suggested that 5.8 and 5.9, which deal with something that isn't subject to regulations anyway, it's a voluntary code, should we just put at the end as an addendum? Okay. Yes, Councillor Godison.
Yeah, if I may just make a comment there on 5.9. Would I be right in thinking, is a suggestion that if a charity individual does sign the voluntary code of conduct, that then he's then legally subject to the rules within that code of conduct? Because I mean, basically, if they're doing direct debit collection, they don't have to have a license, do they? Oh, sorry.
Effectively, no, because it's not a legal requirement. We just have the voluntary code to ask them to behave in a way that we like them to behave. So if they don't follow the code of conduct, there's not much we can do other than, I suppose you could do them under public order maybe if they were really potentially, but it would never get that bad because generally, as I said earlier, they all do behave generally.
If I may be allowed to sort of jump forward a bit then, how does that reconcile with page 13.2? Permission is granted for a maximum of 4 collectors to work in the area. If one can't enforce anything, how does one stop 6 if they wish to have 6?
You can't. This is just how we prefer them to operate. Again, there's no lawful means of changing that. It's just that they do tend to sign up to that, and you don't tend to get more than 4. But if there were more than 4, we couldn't do anything about it.
Although they're not so basically what one can't do is say, well, unless you follow our code of conduct, you will not be given the license. That's a no-no. Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Well, fortunately, most people do seem to adhere to the voluntary code, so let's be grateful. They're obviously nice people, these charity people. Right, okay, let's just move quickly through then. Any more comments on page 49 or 50? Okay, and the last little bit over the page. Okay, and then on to the voluntary code of conduct itself. We'll have the bit about direct debit collecting at the end of that policy, and then it'll go straight on to the code of conduct for collecting by direct debit. Linda's just made one amendment, haven't you, where it should say, section 5 should say 28 days instead of 2 weeks. But does anybody else have anything else to say on that voluntary code, except that you wish it was mandatory? We're on page 52, 53.
I presume that also means that that 14 ID should always be worn for verification purposes, can't be insisted on.
Again, it's a voluntary code, yeah.
Any more comments? I mean, to me, it is remarkable that there aren't any more regulations to do with that. I mean, it's the most annoying kind of collection, and they're very, very in your face. But hopefully, it will come at some stage. Councillor Jones.
I'm quite happy with this, but I just wonder whether we could have it back in a year's time to see how it's working, make sure everything's running as it should be. Yeah.
Thank you. If we could just minute that then to just review it in a year's, not review the policy, but review how it's going in a year's time. Won't rewrite the policy in a year's time. Okay, so subject to those minor amendments, which is to move the bit about direct debit collecting, just to change a couple of minor things. Are we happy with the policy? Everybody agreed? Yes?
Do you like my picture?
Thank you very much. Oh, yes. Is the picture correct? Yes? Okay. It will be in colour. Okay, right. We've nearly finished now. We're finally going to note the outcome of subcommittee meetings. The decision notices are at the back, which I think is very helpful to be able to read the decision notices Does anybody want to comment? I mean, I'll just comment the first two are going for appeal. So that should be nice and time consuming for Linda and her department. Yes, Councillor Franken.
If they're going to appeal, can you let us know the dates? Because I do like to attend to the courts when they do. I missed the last one.
I can confirm that the intractor appeal is being lifted on the 10th of September at Basingstoke Magistrate, and the Rhubarb appeal is lifted on the 4th of September, again at Basingstoke
Is
Magistrate.
they both mornings?
Both morning, so starting at 10 o'clock.
Linda, do you just want to update us on the appeal that's currently, well, there's not much you can say really, that's still underway?
Yeah, members will be aware that you upheld a decision of ours to revoke a private hire driver late last year, December I think. We had the appeal set a couple of weeks ago, but it dragged on. We've got the final day on the 16th in Basingstoke, so if anyone wants to attend that, that'll be in the morning. There's just me left to give evidence, so which I think is quite useful because it'll be fresh in the minds of the magistrates. So that'll be 16th, next Thursday morning at Basingstoke, and that should be dispensed with on that day, hopefully.
Thank you very much. The final one, the variation was granted, so that was fairly straightforward. Okay, I think that's all our business, so thank you very much. I declare the meeting over.